All right, well, welcome everyone. We're going to give it a few minutes to let people join. It looks like, um, yeah, we'll keep letting people join. It looks like the cons are going to be presented before the pros of different approaches. So normally I like to do glass half full, but today we're going to do glass half empty. So hope everyone's all right with that today. All right, we'll give it another minute or so for people to join. Okay, I think we'll get started. And as people join, they can I'll be sure to mention the Q&A and chat feature as people begin to join. Okay, let's get started. And I was just telling the group that some of our slides are um, going to show the pros and the cons um, a little differently than I would like to. The cons might show up first. That's okay. We're going to take the glass half empty approach for this workshop. But that happens sometimes. So welcome everybody. I'm really happy that you've joined today. This is a topic that we like to cover a couple times a year, actually, in various ways, because a lot of our clients are either themselves considering going back to school, are in school, or have family members or children who are considering going to school in some way, shape, or form, whether it be college, trade school, etc., credentials, certificates. So this touches a lot of different people's financial lives. So we really like to cover this one multiple times. And we also like to use it as a jumping off point for you as Questus clients to book a session to talk about your specific college funding strategies. So these are just going to be general approaches that we discuss with clients on a regular basis. But certainly, if anything sounds interesting to you or you have questions about it, you can schedule a session to talk about how that would apply to you. With that said, let's get into it. So today I am your workshop lead. My name is Kimberly Esse. I'm a financial coach and an accredited financial counselor. I'm really happy to join you all today. I'm also a member of the Association for Financial Counseling and Planning Education, and that is where the AFC certification comes from. So just a housekeeping note today, we do have the Q&A function that you're welcome to use so you can ask an anonymous question if you choose. That would be only visible to hosts and panelists, so that's myself and Bryant. And chat questions are going to be public, so anything you put in the chat, others will be able to see unless you direct that to hosts and panelists. So you can go ahead at any time and add your questions to the chat or Q&A. and we'll make sure we get to them either in real time or at the end of the workshop. Okay, so today's agenda is pretty full. I tried to simplify this a little from our last year's workshop because a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, as far as common ways to kind of fund college or to think about planning strategies, these are the ones that we most discuss with clients or that clients come to us about. There are other things we could go way more in depth on. We'll touch on them a little today, but the idea is that if you do have anything that you want to learn more about, you can definitely ask us. So we're going to talk a little about the state of college and trade school costs. This is an update for 2024. So this will give you an idea of what costs are. And it might be a little jarring. It's not necessarily meant to be that way, but it is more as a helpful resource for you to understand where costs are so that you can better prepare for what's coming your way potentially. So we're going to compare those costs and we're going to talk about savings tools and financing options. We're going to talk about creative strategies in paying for school, including tuition and also like negotiating type of techniques. So that's kind of one that people don't know as much about. We'll talk about strategies like that. We'll also talk about bringing the family into the discussion because if you've ever had a coaching session with us at Questus, you know that we always invite family members to join because they're part of the conversation too, and having and normalizing these money conversations is so important, especially when we're talking about school. And then we'll have a Q&A at the very end to answer any questions we haven't gotten to. Okay. So I think, oh, yes, perfect. So what do you think is the 2024 average tuition for college, in-state, out-of-state, or private? This is an open question, so please feel free to add your answer to the chat or not, but think on that for a minute and I will share the results. Kind of a tough one actually, because if you think of the different costs for these kinds of schools, it can be very different. I don't see any guesses. That's okay. So let's get into what these are. So the average tuition and fees for US college and trade schools in 2024. So these are the average costs of private school. This was actually technically the last academic year. We're in spring of 2024, so that'll change again. But private school tuition and fees is on average $42,162. Maybe that doesn't surprise you, maybe it does. Some are much higher, some are lower, so this is the average. The public out-of-state cost is $23,630. So this would be if you're going to a public school, but you're not getting in-state tuition rates, you haven't met the residency requirements yet. And then a public in-state is significantly lower. That's going to a state you have residency in or your child does, and that's at around $10,662. Still a fairly affordable education there. Some of these can be very expensive. So let's move on to a couple of the other average costs, specifically for community colleges and trade schools. So here is the average cost of these different types of educational paths. In-state community college is still the most affordable or on par with a trade school, depending on the trade school, at $4,785 per year. Trade school that is 2 years or less is on average total about $17,000. So I've split that into 2 years, but that can be also more or less than that depending on what the trade is. And then out-of-state community college is just over $8,800 per year. So this may or may not surprise you, but it's a really good snapshot of where we're at with academic costs. These are tuition and fees, so this isn't going to include room and board. This isn't going to include your books. This isn't going to include all of those other ancillary costs. This is just going to be what you're paying in school. Okay, So now that we've had that rude awakening, um, so while tuition and fees and room and board increase, so does the ability for students and adults to receive in-kind and need-based assistance, and so do their payment and financing options. So even though costs are going up around the board, across the board with everything that we're paying for, school's no different, but there are lots of different paths to be able to afford that or lessen the burden that your family is going to bear for some of those costs. And this slide, next slide, basically reiterates that. You don't need to panic. It can be scary, but we're going to work through it. Let's work on a strategy and go in prepared with a plan. All right, but first, a little bit more. I mentioned that we're going to be comparing some costs and we're going to be talking about some unique strategies, but we're also going to talk a little about how Americans are saving by account type for college, what their expectations are for what they plan to pay for college, and how they're using college funds, uh, money they've saved for college. So as the cost of education is increasing, so is the amount of money parents are saving for college. That's not always the case. In fact, a lot of clients that I meet with uh, come to me with their students in high school and they're like, wait, I didn't actually plan for this yet. What can I do? It's never too late. It's certainly never too late. But it is true that parents are saving more for college or they're expecting to. So they're considering that the amount of increase they're saving for college is about 2,118 more than they expected over a 5-year span. And so that would be 2,118 more than what you're seeing here in the right-hand graph. So they're expecting to have to save that much more per year. Americans on average want to save $57,900 for college expenses. That's their goal. On average, parents are saving about a little over 5,000 a year for their kids' college. 30% are putting that money in 529 plans, and we're going to talk about that. That is a pretty large amount of college savings. 529s have a lot of flexibility and benefits, so we are going to talk about that too. On average, Americans have actually saved a little over 26,500 in their 529s. So that's really good progress as far as being able to save for some of those costs we saw, but it also doesn't, as you saw, completely cover all of the tuition and fees, and especially if you're considering a private school. So that's where getting creative with your strategies and adjusting your plans really can be very helpful. A few more statistics before we move on. 2/3 of parents are saving, planning, or doing both for college. So they're saving and planning, or they're saving or planning. So 2 out of 3 parents are doing that. 1/3 of parents are not planning or saving for college, and 21% of families will use retirement savings if needed. That's a big number. That's 1 out of 5. We are going to talk about using Roth IRAs as a possible college funding strategy, but when I talk about that, I'm going to reiterate that you can borrow for school, but you can't borrow for retirement. So that is something that I really want to make sure people are aware of. If you think about it from that perspective. Okay, so let's move on to some strategies. Actually, first I'm going to ask a poll question. Hopefully our polls will be working, but so where do you fit in? If you're saving for a child, yourself, or a family member, where are you at with your savings? And go ahead and select what fits best for you. I'll give you a minute or so. Maybe more than one applies. Just choose the one that best fits your situation. I guess I could read these out loud. So one of them is I've started saving for college or thinking about it, but I don't know where to start. And that is pretty common. I've started saving in a savings account, bonds, or CDs. So maybe you started saving for college, but you're not specifically strategically considering that college money, or it's not in a college account. Maybe you've started using a specific college saving or investment type, like a 529. Maybe you've started saving some or all of the above, but you're also using investments. You may consider retirement funds, or you have another plan, or you expect to leverage loans, scholarships, or other benefits. Okay, so if you are done answering, we'll go ahead and I can go ahead and look at the results and share those with you. If you haven't had a chance to do that, that's okay. We'll go ahead and move on. I'm waiting for the results, so hang tight. Okay, so it looks like the majority of people have said, this is interesting. I have another plan or expect to leverage loans, scholarships, or other benefits. That's great. I think that, and we are going to talk about those as strategies. I think that's fabulous to hear. I think it can cover all of your expenses. And I think that it's very optimistic as well. And I love that. So knowing that the audience is, that's where the audience is, I'll try to make sure we really touch on those strategies. But in the meantime, we'll talk about some other ways to pay for school outside of that in case you find that you're going to need that extra help. Okay, so let's start with the basics. And we can go ahead and just click through all of these real quick. Perfect. So some of the savings tools that we're going to start with today are 529s, which is, as we mentioned, 30% of saving for college is in a 529 saving plan. 8% is in a prepaid tuition 529 plan. We're going to talk briefly about Coverdell Education Savings Accounts, or ESAs. These are about 2% of what people are using for savings for college. We're going to really briefly touch on custodial IRAs, UTMAs, and UGMAs because these are not common and there are specific uses for them, but I'm only going to breeze over them because if you do want to talk more about those, that's a conversation you can have with a coach and a tax professional. We're going to talk about Roth IRAs, and we're also going to talk about just general diversified investment and saving portfolios. Okay, so the first item here, the 529s, this is where we're going to talk about the cons first, unfortunately. Sorry about that. So let's talk about 529 prepaid tuition. So basically what this means is that you are prepaying tuition using today's rates with a state school or with any school in your state. It's through the state. So that's the idea behind these prepaid tuitions. You're locking in a rate and you're paying toward that rate so that when the time comes that you or your student goes to school, that the tuition would be paid for at that rate, and the tuition will then be paid directly to the school that they're going to go to. So we'll talk about the pros because there's some really good pros here. Some of the cons include that for this kind of plan, it's only going to pay for tuition expenses because consider that it's going directly to the school. So it's only going to cover your tuition expenses. It's not necessarily guaranteed by the state if there's financial difficulty with the state. There must be a resident of the state offering the plan. So meaning in anyone's case, you must live in the state where this is offered, or your family member who's paying for this must live in the state. So let's say an aunt or uncle are paying for this for you and they live in the state, then that would be okay. Or you have to live in the state. May have age or grade limits. Yeah, so this relates to how when you must use the funds by in order for them to still be viable for you. So you'll want to just make sure when you're looking at a prepaid tuition plan that you understand what the language is for that and what are the parameters of usage for it. It is a contract, so really This is locking in that cost, but the the contract piece means that you are locked into that contract, so you have to really understand what you're signing up for. Because it is a way to hedge for increased costs of tuition over time, you're kind of sacrificing flexibility for locking in that rate. And then as far as investment options, there aren't any. So you're really just putting that to this plan, and they may be investing it, but you're not choosing investments. You're not necessarily having a say in how that's managed. They are inflexible as well. So use it or lose it, or you may be able to get the money you put into it back, but there may be interest that you're going to lose out on gains that you wouldn't ever see because again, you don't get to choose the investments, and there are going to be fees for taking your money out if you even can. So that is part of understanding the contract. Let's talk about the pros now. So some of the pros include they allow prepayment of tuition at today's rate, so you are locking that in. It is guaranteed by your state in many cases, but again, there might be loopholes that I mentioned for if there's financial difficulty in the state. It may cover 1 to 5 years of tuition, so that's a pro because it can offer even more of the tuition costs than a typical 4 year potentially graduate. There's a predetermined contract that allows you to sort of absorb I'm sorry, you are not having to pay for those increases that we see when we're looking at those numbers as far as how much each year the costs of school are going up. And there may be portability in the contract that allows you to move it to another school or even another state. So that's something that would be mentioned in the contract. Another thing to note about this is that these plans have a really high contribution limit, and the school will be able to tell you what that is and how much that's going to cost you. So it's something to at least look into within your state to see if that makes sense for you. All right, and let's move on to 529 savings plans. So this is by far the most common college savings account type. You may have heard of it if you're thinking about college costs. So again, we're going to talk about the cons, but the idea behind a 529 savings plan is that you're actually opening that account at a brokerage, and these are managed by state. So are the 529 tuition plans, obviously, because you're locking in a state tuition rate. But 529 savings plans are also state based. So they may have state tax benefits, they may not, but that's how those work. It doesn't necessarily tie you to going to a school in the state where you open the account. It's just that they're mandated by state. So each state has different maximum contribution limits, and they have different tax breaks and different handling of how they manage 529 distributions. Okay, so cons. So it can impact your federal financial aid if owned by a parent or student. So once it's owned by a student, and let's say they're the ones who are filing the FAFSA, and they're going to say that this is an asset that they have to contribute, that may affect their eligibility for certain loans or grants in the FAFSA. So that's something to consider. Funds not used for qualified educational expenses will be taxed at ordinary income plus a 10% penalty. So we haven't talked about the pros of 529s, but 529s look a lot like a tax sheltered 401k type account where you would put the money into this account and you would invest it, and then it grows tax free so long as the money is in the account. And when it is distributed, the money can be used for eligible expenses and will not be taxed or penalized. If you do use those funds for something other than eligible education expenses according to the plan, then you will get those penalties and the income tax. Contributions can be considered a gift for tax purposes. So this is where you want to just confirm what the gift amount is. Per year, the IRS changes it to see where that contribution is going to fall as far as a tax for you as the gifter to your beneficiary. And there are less options for investments than your typical brokerage account. Um, of course, you're getting a tax sheltered account and you get the benefit of not having to pay taxes as it grows, but you do have limited investment options. Now let's talk about the pros. So you retain control of the plan. So unlike your 529 prepaid tuition plan, you control it, you open it, you are managing the investments, and that can be a pro or a con, depending on how you feel about managing your investments. But because there are limited investment options, it's usually not a huge problem. Tax savings. So again, these function like an IRA. So you don't have to worry about paying taxes on a yearly basis with these. It can be professionally invested for you by a brokerage. It can be passive or actively managed. Plans are usually portable to another person, so you can change the beneficiary. Plans allow you to save a considerable amount. Oftentimes, the limit is $300,000. It can be even higher. I read that, well, I think it's Washington, D.C., that it's 500,000. So these are really high limits and often more than you would need, more than you would save. But these limits are high on purpose because they really want you to be able to put as much money away for college, depending on where you want to go, as possible. But check your state laws on that because each state is going to have a different maximum. And so 529s also cover up to $10,000 per year of student loan costs or K-12 education. That's huge. So that's something to consider when thinking about a 529 plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be just for college tuition. It can be for specific student loan or K-12 costs. And there's no eligibility or age limit restrictions. So it doesn't matter how much you earn, you can contribute to this. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are, you can contribute to this. So that is a very flexible feature of 529s. And as we move on to the next slide, this is just a brief slide that if you'd like to screenshot these or go to these sites, there's collegesavings.org, which is a location to go to compare 529 options and to search for those. There's also upromise.com, which gives you guides for different 529 plans by state. So go ahead and check those out. Those are really helpful resources for learning more about 529s as well. Okay. So Coverdell's are only 2% of people are using Coverdell education savings accounts or ESAs for their college funding needs. It's not super common. It used to be more common, and it actually was the precursor to 529s. So 529s are kind of a new and improved version of an ESA, but ESAs still exist. They still are used, and you can still open one. Not all brokerages offer them anymore. But let's go through the pros and cons because there are some specific benefits to an ESA. And you should also note that you can do both. You can have a 529 and an ESA. So pros are that you can contribute $2,000 a year per child. This is also a con. It's only $2,000 per year per child. More flexibility in investment options than a 529. So that's true. It's not restricted by what you can invest in. There's way more options, more like if you had a brokerage account. It does grow tax-free like a 529. Accounts can be transferred to another family member, so same with a 529. But unlike a 529, funds here can be used for qualified elementary and secondary expenses, not just tuition, expenses. So remember how we talked about room and board, books, lab fees, uniforms, all of these school supplies. Those are things you need to pay for when you go to school, but those aren't included in tuition and fees. Well, an ESA does cover those. So that is one benefit of an ESA that a 529 doesn't have. So I shouldn't say 529 doesn't have. 529 does allow for certain school expenses, but not as much as an ESA does. And you can use it for elementary and secondary expenses as well. Whereas with a 529, you have a $10,000 limit per year for that. It can also be rolled into a 529. So that is an option if you decide to have an ESA and then choose to roll that into a 529 later. Cons, though, are that there are very low contribution limits and you can't contribute past the age of 18. So really the most you can contribute would be from age 1 to 18, 2,000 a year. So it's going to limit how much can be in the account. It must be transferred to a beneficiary or another relative or used by their 30th birthday. So these are age limits that don't exist with a 529. It can, again, like a 529, impact federal financial aid qualifications. There are income restrictions, so that's something to look into from a tax perspective. It must be opened before the beneficiary is 18, and contributions end at that age as well. Fees can eat up small balances. This also depends on what you're invested in, and because there's more investment options, you may be paying more fees for let's say an actively managed EFT or ETF or a mutual fund. So that's something to consider. And then there's no state tax benefit because it's not state administered. Remember that the 529 is state-based, and so there can be tax benefits potentially. With an ESA, that is not the case. Okay, I think we're ready to go to a very quick overview of UGMAs and UTMAs and custodial IRAs. So these are taxable investment accounts that you can set up to benefit a minor, but they're controlled by an adult custodian. And the difference between an UGMA and an UTMA. An UGMA is an account that is purely financial products. So that's cash, stock, mutual funds, bonds, even insurance policies, those kinds of more kind of standard financial products that we all know and love. An UTMA it's a little more flexible. It can actually hold property, real estate. It's a little more complicated. That's why we're not going to cover it too much here, because it's not necessarily the right choice for everybody. And these can be good for specific situations. So it's always good, if you're interested in learning more about these, to talk to a financial coach who can give you more information, but then to have those conversations with a tax advisor, potentially an attorney, other people that can specialize in helping you figure out if that's going to make sense for you. But it is controlled by you as a custodian, and it can help with income transfers from a higher tax bracket to your child's lower one. And so that's where I say we can give information, but ultimately we'll refer you to your tax professional or advisor for these ones. But if you want to know more, you should book a coaching session, or you can ask a question now. All right, let's move on to Roths. And this will be our last of this section before we move into strategies. So Roth IRAs is a college savings plan. Yes, a Roth IRA can function as a college savings account, but with caution. We'll talk about the pros and cons, because this can be great, but it can also be something that can hurt your financial retirement readiness. So let's get into it. So some of the pros include that with a Roth IRA, let me back up and just explain what a Roth IRA is. So a Roth IRA is an account that you have funded with after-tax dollars. So you've already paid taxes on the money. And so you're putting this into a Roth IRA, and the money is growing tax-free, just like a regular IRA or 401k. You're in a traditional 401k at work, your money's growing tax-free, but you're going to have to pay taxes later. Not so with a Roth IRA. So that's the difference there. Money earned can be withdrawn for educational purposes without a penalty, but you'll still have to pay income taxes. So that's where a Roth IRA can be leveraged as an educational backstop to some of the other things that we've talked about, because anything you've put into a Roth IRA because it's already been taxed can be withdrawn at any time. And that's regardless of what you want to use it for. It doesn't have to be educational. The contributions you've made to a Roth can be taken out at any time. Earnings cannot, unless you are 59 and a half and you've held the Roth IRA for 5 years. But with educational expenses, if you're not 59 and a half, you still can take those earnings out for qualified expenses without that penalty and tax hit. So that's why we're going to talk about Roth IRAs as a backstop, because it does allow flexibility inherently as a Roth IRA. The fact that you can take those contributions you've made out already is a huge benefit of a Roth. But with educational expenses, you get to also take earnings without tax or penalty. So that's really why a Roth IRA can function in this way. But I'm going to also caveat that by saying talk to your tax professional, because you want to make sure you get that right. And you want to make sure that if you're going to take earnings out before 59 and a half on a Roth, that you have the documentation to substantiate that those were used for educational expenses. And talking to a tax professional in advance will make sure that you don't have any surprises on tax day. We don't want that. But we do want to just give you that education to let you know that this is something you can do, and you just want to seek advisement from a tax professional for that. Okay, so no penalties when used to pay for qualified educational expenses, check. Grows tax-free, check. It's not reported as income for FAFSA until you take the money out. So unlike a 529, which is reported and you're saying, I'm using this for school, a Roth IRA wouldn't necessarily be used for school. It would have to be taken out to be used for school. So it's not going to be counted in that way unless you then realize it as income. And then, of course, it's income, and you're going to have to report that as FAFSA income. So that's something to keep in mind. You can contribute to college costs up to $7,000 a year. That's this tax year, so 2024. $8,000 if you're 50 and over, and that's called a catch-up contribution. So this is when I say you can contribute to college costs up to that. What I really mean is you can contribute money into a Roth IRA, $7,000 a year, or $8,000 if you're 50 and over, regardless of what you use it for. If it's for your retirement, that's still $7,000 a year. It's not extra if it's for college costs, or instead of retirement, it's college costs. It's any amount for any purpose. It has to be $7,000 a year max in 2024 to a Roth, but it can be used for college costs. It can supplement other options, and children with earned income can open an account and contribute as well. It's important to note that the person that's opening and contributing to a Roth has earned income. If they have earned income, they can contribute up to however much their earned income is, up to the limit that year. There are such things as spousal Roth IRAs, and if you have a question about that, please let me know or ask or book a session. That doesn't necessarily require earned income, but that's for another conversation. Cons. So if you're under 59 and a half, earnings you withdraw are taxable. So we talked about that. Earnings you withdraw are going to be taxable, but if it's for school expenses, you won't have that penalty. It may impact your federal aid qualification once you actually have those funds and you've taken possession, you've distributed that out. If you take earnings out before you've owned the account for 5 years, a 10% penalty tax will apply to the earnings. And the max income limits to contribute to a Roth, max income limits to contribute to a Roth and based on filing status. So with a Roth IRA, not everyone can contribute. You have to earn, depending on your filing status, a certain amount or less per year to qualify. The IRS has these limits published and they change each year. So I urge you to check that out if you're not sure if you earn too much to do this. And then lastly, it may inhibit your ability to retire securely. This is, again, when I say you can't get a loan for retirement. You can get a loan for school. So you really want to consider the trade-off here of, is it worth taking money out of this retirement account that I won't be able to put money back into? Because if you put 7,000 in this year and you take 7,000 out, you don't get to put 7,000 more back in. It's not a loan. You simply lose that money and that earning power. So it's worth considering opportunity costs here. And this is another place where coaches are really helpful, because we can talk about your particular situation and help you figure out what's best for you, given what your options are, what your timeline is, how much money you're trying to save. Okay, so we'll briefly move on to the next slide. I'm not going to talk too much about this. There is the option, of course, to save or invest in taxable accounts. These are mutual funds or ETFs. These are savings accounts or CDs. They can be bonds, treasury bonds. They can be other kinds of bonds. So there's a lot of different other ways that you can save for school that you're probably aware of. But these are ways you can save or invest for many, many purposes. So we're not going to specifically talk about them for school. But again, if you have any questions about these as part of your strategy for saving, you can schedule a session with a coach, or you can ask a question or Q&A in the chat, and I will get to that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about other financing options. So you had all mentioned that you have these other options for paying for school, and that you're kind of going to leverage those, or you expect that those are going to help buffer the costs. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. Some of these you may know, some of these you may not. So we'll just talk through these very briefly. Scholarships. So of course we all know scholarships, and if you're like me, you dreaded doing them when you were applying for school because you just felt like all of the effort that went into it, but who knows how many people are applying. So when I say scholarships, I think it's important to check the national scholarships that we all know about, but it's also really, really good to check local scholarship opportunities. I see so many nonprofits in my community that offer scholarships that maybe aren't the biggest scholarships we can imagine, but little by little would help you pay for school or pay your full tuition. And they are local. And if you are in your community and you're wanting to connect with people in that way, I think that that's a really great opportunity to get these kind of smaller scholarship funds. You have less people applying for them. And sometimes they aren't even applied for. There are scholarships where people don't apply for them, or there's only a few people that apply. And so really leveraging memberships that you're in, family memberships that you have, organizations that you volunteer with or that you know about, look and see if they have scholarships. It's an overlooked resource for funding college. Assistantships are also really helpful. Mostly I've seen these for grad school, but they do exist for undergrad students depending on the school and the program. So look for these on your college job boards. That's usually where you'll see them. College job boards can be just such a great resource. If your school, that your prospective school has a like a career studio or a career office that helps you navigate careers and internships and assistantships, that can be really helpful too, because it might help you also decide where you want to go to school, depending on what opportunities the schools you're looking at offer for those kinds of things. Internships, a lot of these are paid these days, which is fabulous. So this is another one you can find through a job search. You can also look up school businesses or companies that are interesting to you, and just look on their job boards to see if they have any internships. FAFSA, of course, we've talked about that a little. I'm not going to talk too much about FAFSA. If you have questions about FAFSA, or loans or grants, please schedule a session with a coach. But FAFSA is also something you should apply for. It's the free application for federal student aid, and everyone qualifies for something, even if it's just loans. So you should definitely file the FAFSA. And then I mentioned loans here, but we're not going to get too much into loans. But if you do have questions about specific loans and what's right for you or what the pros and cons are, please ask us. Grants are here as well, which you can also qualify for through FAFSA. And then there's employer options and funding. So this is something I really want to touch on because some of our companies offer fabulous employer options for school. I've seen some of these offerings. So tuition reimbursement and waivers. This can be for you as an employee. This can be for your dependents or your family members. This can be that you're paying for the school, but then with satisfactory pass grade or test, you get reimbursed, or there's a waiver that's offered for you so that you don't even have to pay out of pocket. Working for a nonprofit can have a lot of benefits too, including potential for qualifying for a public student loan forgiveness, which is something a coach can help you with. Loan repayment assistance, one of our employers offers this. This is so amazing. I've never actually seen that with any employer before. So this is something that you can look at with your employer to see if your employer offers these kinds of benefits. There's benefits you might not know about. Just ask your employer, go to your HR benefits site, do whatever research you need to do to figure out what's actually offered, because there might be more than you're aware of. There's resident assistantships, which is mainly living on campus and being a resident assistant within campus living. This can actually be really helpful for job experience, but also tuition. Sometimes you'll get paid and you'll get a tuition discount. So that's something that can be really nice if you're living on campus. And then work study. So work study is one that I didn't actually know about until a few years ago. It is need-based and it can decrease your loan awards, but you wouldn't have to take as much loan out. But the way that work study works is it's usually in a field that you're interested in. They pay you as a paycheck rather than a lump sum. So instead of getting like a loan or getting a grant, you're going to be paid as you're working. So that can be a pro or a con depending on your situation, but it is earned. So it's not a gift, it's not a loan. You're earning money. It can go toward your tuition. And many work study programs take into account your interest, your degree program, and can help provide experience in the field. So it's a really great benefit that many schools provide. And lastly, we're going to talk about creative strategies. So these are going to be, maybe you know about them, maybe you don't, and some of them are going to be for people who are still in high school. Dual enrollment options. This is a state-funded option that allows you to work through high school credits. You're getting your high school degree concurrently with getting college credits, and it's dual enrollment. So it's called different things in different states. You can search Running Start program, but it's a really fabulous program where you can really like leverage the benefit of getting college classes at your community college while being in high school. And then when you graduate high school, you may have enough credits to skip 1 year or possibly two, depending on how many credits you were signed up for with dual enrollment. So look into this within your state because there may be some really good options here that you have time to take advantage of. Of course, high school AP and honors classes for college credit, that helped me a lot when I went to college doing that and testing, and then testing out of those classes and not having to take those, pay for that in college was great. ROTC and National Guard and military. I am a veteran spouse. My husband was in the military, so I know a lot about that if you have any questions. But there are definitely some great benefits to being affiliated with the military, ROTC, or National Guard. Negotiation and payment plans. So this this is one that I also didn't know about. But when we think about negotiating, we think about students who are getting football scholarships, or they have something going on where their school's competing for them. And that's not always the case with negotiation. In fact, anyone can negotiate, especially if you have multiple offers. One benefit plan, or I'm sorry, not benefit plan, one um, uh, plan that they send you the tuition bill and they say they can give you this much aid. You could go to another school and say, this school's going to offer me this. What could you do? It can be uncomfortable to negotiate, but I think it's really helpful for students to do this because it's better to learn this young, and kind of know how to negotiate early on in your life, so that it makes it easier to negotiate when you get older. And I always also think that you have more power than you think you do here, because the worst thing that's going to happen is the school, the person you're talking to, is going to say, no, we can't do anything better. And now you know, it's not like they said, well, not only can we not do that, but we're revoking that acceptance. They're not going to do that. So it never hurts to try to negotiate, because oftentimes you will be able to negotiate a better potential aid or scholarship, or you'll at least be pointed in the right direction for resources or scholarships that you might be eligible for. Payment plans are another one. Just make sure when you're looking into payment plans that it's a good plan, it makes sense, there's not a lot of fees, or if there are, they're reasonable and they fit into your financial plan better. That's another one coaches can help with. If you're considering a payment plan, we can figure out if that works for you. We can help you figure that out. Tuition and aid counseling and scholarship listings, pre-matriculation. This we kind of talked about. This is going to the school and talking to them, negotiating, but also finding out what resources exist that they would recommend for scholarships or aid, because if that's the school you're going to go to, or that's the determining factor, knowing how helpful those people are going to be for you, how helpful they are in providing resources, might give you a sense of if that's the right school for you and if that's going to make sense for your financial wellness as well. Community college transfer. We talked earlier about how much cheaper it is to go to community college. And I think that it's overlooked. A lot of people do it, but it's very overlooked that you can just go to community college for 2 years and then transfer to another school. It's also a great way to get residency in a state where you might be otherwise paying outside tuition. You pay out of state tuition for community college, but it's still going to be around the same as an in-state tuition. And then you're getting your residency, and then you're able to matriculate into the school of your choice, the state or university in that state with residency, and you're not having to pay that exorbitant amount to cover the difference until you get residency. There's online flex options or non-traditional structures. This is very common. We're seeing it a lot more. I get ads for this as an adult learner, that I should be looking into these kind of non-standard, non-traditional schools. And I am a student, so I think that's why I get those ads. But these options are flex options. They're completely online in some cases. They allow for you to enroll in as many credits as you can within a semester, and you go at your own speed. So there's a lot of flexibility that there didn't used to be. And this can also be great for young learners as well, like your high school students going into college. So these are things to look into. It doesn't have to look the way we envision college looking if that doesn't resonate. There's also college level examination programs, which it's CLEP. This is through College Board, so it's the same organization that does AP testing. And you can actually test in, or I should say out of classes at a college level with these courses. I mean, with these examinations is what I mean. So you can look into that. You can go search CLEP and you will find College Board site on information for that. And then lastly, life experience credits. This is similar to the college level examination program, but the life experience credits is really something that your college, it's school by school. that they may say, oh, you have all of this experience in this particular field, so we can waive some of these requirements. This is also very common in certifications. So if you're going for a certification, but you already have all this experience in the field, then you may not have to do an examination. You may not have to take a certain class. You may not have as many requirements, and it can make it cheaper for you. So consider life experience credits as an option as well. And then bringing family into the discussion. This is our last slide. This goes maybe like, I think that this is very common that is already happening, but it's just a reminder to you that you want to start these conversations young. You want to consider when the child is old enough to start saving for college, to start understanding what that means, to have those conversations, because it can set the expectation that I'm going to go to college or I'm going to go to trade school or whatever it is. I'm going to be going and getting higher education. It sets that expectation. It also opens up conversations about money, which we as coaches always really care about, because normalizing money conversations is the first step in having financial wellness yourself, but also within your family. So you're starting those conversations young. You're bringing everyone equally into the conversation to strategize, to understand that college isn't free, or there are certain things that have a money value assigned to them that we have to start saving for. So this is another opportunity to consider other ways that you can engage your children in money conversations. I've put here a green light card or similar teaching credit type card for learning spending habits for children. These are things that they're basically preloaded ATM cards, maybe more like a gift card. So they're preloaded, but they function like credit cards. This can be a really good learning tool for children, and it promotes a culture of savings, which we always want to do. Okay, so I see that there is a question. It looks like somebody missed part of the recording, and will it be shared? And the answer is yes. Bryant, I wonder, would you be able to tell us, will that be shared on the platform, or will it be emailed out? How can this person access this recording?
Yeah, no problem. It will be emailed out after it's concluded.
Okay, great. So yes, the recording will be emailed, and I believe too that at some point it will be loaded to the platform as well, and you could just search college funding strategies or college in the resources, and it should pull up this one as well as maybe some other resources. Okay, so are there any other questions? How do we contact a coach? That's a good question. So you can do this in the platform when you sign in at the far bottom right-hand side. It'll have a picture of your coach, and you can click on that, and then from there you can book with any of the coaches. That's the landing page for you to explore different coaches and our specialties and our availability, and you can book from there. But also there is a link that I'm going to find that you can also use to schedule a session. Hold on just a moment. Here it is. So this particular link is, oh, I'm not able to share this with you. Hey, Brian, I'm going to put this link in, but I'm not able to share with attendees for some reason. That's really weird. Could you share that with the group? And this will
Yes.
link to to the site, but you'll want to scroll down to the bottom, and that's where you'll see the coaches. And I can also give this directly to you, the person who asked this. And there's no fee for coaching. So if you are a Questus client, so your employer is paying for Questus, they they are paying the fee. So it's free for you. It's a benefit that your employer provides, and you have unlimited coaching sessions. So you can feel free to meet with multiple coaches about various subjects. You can pick one coach and stick with them. And we have a lot of different topics that we can help you with. So we encourage you to schedule as much as you'd like. Okay. Do we have any other questions today? Okay, I don't see any other questions. So if there are none, oh wait, there might be one. Oh, okay. So there is one more question. It says, can my dependent have the session with the coach? We definitely invite families to attend coaching sessions. I think that in this particular case, if you'd like to join your dependent, that would be fabulous. So it can be you and your dependent, and we would be happy to meet with you both. We do encourage families, partners, children, etc., to join their Questis clients in the coaching sessions, specifically with college. Well, with anything really, but college, I find people really want to involve other people, that and home buying. So definitely invite who you need to invite to have that conversation. No problem. Okay, any other questions? I think that's all I see here. I hope this was helpful. If there was anything that we talked about that you have questions about, please contact us. You can contact a coach, and the session can doesn't need to be, it's 30 minutes, but it doesn't necessarily need to be 30 minutes if you just have a quick question. So just feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help clarify anything that we talked about today. And with that, I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for joining me today.